Have you ever found yourself standing in the ruins of what you once thought was a well-built life? Perhaps you're at that moment right now. The career that defined you for decades suddenly feels empty or has been taken from you. The relationships you invested in have grown distant. The strength and vitality of youth has begun to fade. The plans you made decades ago haven't materialized as you imagined, and now you wonder if they ever will. You look in the mirror and barely recognize the man staring back at you. These moments of profound disruption aren't just midlife crises as our culture so dismissively labels them. They are sacred invitations to a deeper encounter with God and with your authentic self. What appears to be an ending might actually be the beginning of the most meaningful chapter of your life. In the ruins of what was once certain, God speaks most clearly if we have ears to hear. Today we'll explore what God reveals to a man over 40 when everything seems lost. Guided by the profound spiritual wisdom of Saint Ignatius of Loyola, a man who knew catastrophic loss intimately before finding his true calling. 5 centuries ago, a proud Spanish nobleman and soldier named Ignatius lay in bed recovering from a cannonball that had shattered his legs in battle. He was nearly 30 years old, and everything he had built his identity around had been destroyed in an instant. His military career was over. His dreams of courtly glory were finished. His physical strength was compromised. Like many men facing the collapse of their carefully constructed lives, Ignatius initially fell into despair. But in that place of total loss, something remarkable happened. God began to reveal truths to him that would not only transform his own life, but would eventually transform the world through the society of Jesus he would later found. The wisdom Ignatius discovered in his moment of crisis speaks powerfully to men today, particularly those in midlife and beyond who find themselves disoriented by unexpected loss, or the quiet desperation of lives that no longer satisfy the deepest longings of their souls. What happens to a man when the scaffolding of his identity collapses? When the things he has used to prop up his sense of self and worth suddenly give way? For some, this collapse comes through dramatic events: job loss, divorce, financial ruin, health crises. For others, it arrives more subtly through a growing sense of emptiness despite outward success. A feeling that something essential is missing, despite having checked all the boxes society told you to check. Either way, these moments of disorientation are not merely psychological phenomena. They are profoundly spiritual crossroads, where God invites us to a deeper way of living and being. Ignatius would call this moment an invitation to freedom, to discover who we truly are beyond the roles, achievements, and possessions that have defined us. The first revelation God offers a man in midlife crisis is perhaps the most difficult to accept: that much of what he has pursued and achieved was built on shifting sand rather than solid rock. This realization isn't meant to invalidate the good things you've done or the responsibilities you've fulfilled. Rather, it illuminates how easily we build our identities on what Ignatius would call disordered attachments, things that cannot ultimately sustain us because they are finite and impermanent. Career advancement, financial security, physical prowess, social status, even the respect of others, these are not inherently bad things, but they make poor foundations for a man's deepest sense of self. When these things begin to change or are taken away, as inevitably happens to every man who lives long enough, the crisis that follows reveals how much we have staked our worth on things that cannot last. As we explore what God reveals in these moments of loss and transition, I invite you to approach these reflections not as abstract concepts, but as invitations to a more authentic way of living. The wisdom of Ignatius offers a roadmap for men navigating the particular challenges of midlife and beyond, a time when the questions of meaning and purpose often become more urgent than ever before. Let's begin this journey together, understanding that what feels like an ending might actually be the doorway to the life you were created for all along. When Ignatius lay recovering from his battle wounds, he asked for romantic novels to pass the time, but none were available. Instead, he was given a life of Christ and stories of the saints. At first, reluctantly, and then with growing fascination, he began to notice something crucial about his interior life. When he daydreamed about returning to his old life of military glory and courtly romance, he initially felt excitement, but was left feeling empty and agitated afterward. But when he contemplated the lives of the saints and imagined himself following their example, he experienced a deep and lasting peace that remained even after his thoughts moved elsewhere. Through this experience, Ignatius discovered one of his most important spiritual insights: the discernment of spirits. the ability to recognize the different ways God speaks to us through our emotional and spiritual experiences. For men over 40 facing the collapse of former certainties, this first lesson from Ignatius is invaluable. God reveals to us through our disappointments and losses that we have been listening to the wrong voices, pursuing goals and living by values that do not actually lead to lasting fulfillment. The career advancement that once energized you now leaves you feeling empty. The achievements that once defined your worth now seem hollow. The possessions that signified success now feel like burdens. These are not signs of failure but invitations to recognize what Ignatius would call disordered attachments, the things we have made ultimate that were never meant to bear the weight of our deepest identity and purpose. What feels like failure or loss is often God's mercy, revealing that we have been building on unstable foundations. Like Ignatius confined to his sickbed, we are being given an opportunity to discern more carefully the voices competing for our attention and allegiance. The voice of the world tells us that a man's worth is measured by his productivity, his earnings, his influence, or his physical vitality. When these things begin to change or are threatened, the world has little comfort to offer beyond strategies to desperately maintain what is inevitably passing away. But another voice speaks in these moments of crisis. One that whispers of a different foundation for manhood and human dignity. One not subject to the ravages of time, changing circumstances, or the fickle opinions of others. I want to pause here for a moment and connect with you more personally. Have you experienced that sense of hollowness, of wondering if the life you've built is truly the one your soul longs for? That quiet dissatisfaction that follows you even into your moments of greatest outward success. If you're nodding right now, please share in the comments with the words, "I'm seeking a deeper foundation." Your willingness to acknowledge this feeling might be exactly what another man needs to see, to know he isn't alone in his own spiritual search. Sometimes the greatest obstacle to finding a more authentic path is the isolation we feel, believing we're the only ones questioning the stories we've been told about what makes a successful life. Your comment could be the first step, not just in your own journey to greater spiritual freedom, but in creating a community where others feel safe enough to begin their own. This brings us to the second profound revelation God offers men in midlife crisis. True freedom comes not from having unlimited choices or the absence of constraints, but from ordering our lives toward their proper end. In his spiritual exercises, Ignatius begins with what he calls the principle and foundation, a statement that articulates the purpose of human life. Man is created to praise, reverence, and serve God, and by this means to save his soul. The other things on the face of the earth are created for man to help him in attaining the end for which he is created. Hence, man is to make use of them in as far as they help him in the attainment of his end, and he must rid himself of them in as far as they prove a hindrance to him. This principle might initially sound restrictive to modern ears, accustomed to thinking of freedom as the absence of limitations. But what Ignatius recognized, and what God reveals to men in moments of crisis, is that true freedom isn't found in boundless options, but in proper orientation. A compass is only useful when it points reliably to true north. Similarly, a human life finds its freedom not in the absence of direction, but in alignment with its true purpose. The midlife crisis that many men experience is often, at its core, a crisis of disorientation, a painful recognition that they have been measuring their lives by the wrong metrics and moving toward goals that cannot ultimately satisfy the soul's deepest longings. For men over 40 who have spent decades building careers, relationships, and identities according to cultural expectations and personal ambitions, this reorientation can be profoundly disruptive. Everything that once seemed solid, a well-defined professional identity, a clear path to retirement, established patterns of family life, may suddenly feel uncertain. But in this disruption lies the possibility of a freedom more profound than anything we've previously known. It's the freedom that comes from recognizing that our worth isn't tied to our productivity, that our dignity doesn't depend on our achievements, that our value isn't measured by our utility or our bank accounts. The spirituality of Ignatius invites men to consider a radical question. What if everything you've lost or fear losing was actually preventing you from discovering who you truly are and what you're truly meant for? This isn't to minimize the real pain of job loss, health challenges, relationship breakdowns, or financial setbacks that often trigger midlife crises. Rather, it's to suggest that these painful experiences might be the very means through which God is inviting you to a more authentic way of being in the world, one not dependent on the shifting foundations that previously defined you. Consider how Ignatius's own life illustrates this paradoxical freedom. Before his injury, he was bound by cultural expectations of nobility and military prowess, by his own vanity and ambition. His identity was tightly tethered to external markers of worth and success. The cannonball that shattered his legs also shattered these attachments, painful as that process was. What emerged from this breaking was not a diminished man, but one who discovered a freedom and purpose far greater than anything his former life offered. The loss of his old identity created space for a new one to emerge, one built on the solid foundation of divine love, rather than the shifting sands of worldly achievement and recognition. For the man in midlife crisis, God reveals that what feels like loss might actually be liberation. The career setback that threatens your sense of professional identity might be creating space for work that better aligns with your deepest values. The relationship challenge that disrupts your family life might be inviting a more authentic way of connecting with those you love. The health scare that confronts you with your mortality might be awakening you to the preciousness of each day and the importance of living with purpose. The financial difficulty that compromises your sense of security might be teaching you that true security lies elsewhere. Ignatius would invite us to see these disruptions not as random misfortunes, but as invitations to greater freedom and authenticity. He developed a prayer practice called the Examen, a daily review of one's experiences to discern where God has been present and active. This practice is especially valuable for men navigating midlife transitions, as it helps us recognize the subtle ways God might be speaking through even our most painful experiences. The Examen asks us to notice moments of consolation, when we feel drawn toward God and experience peace, gratitude, and love, and moments of desolation, when we feel distant from God and experience anxiety, fear, and despair. By paying attention to these movements of the Spirit, we begin to recognize patterns and discern the direction toward which God might be guiding us. For the man over 40 facing the collapse of former certainties, the Examen offers a practical tool for navigating what feels like wilderness. It creates space to ask essential questions. When do I feel most alive and authentic? When do I sense purpose and meaning? When do I experience peace that persists even amidst difficulty? The answers to these questions often reveal surprising truths about what truly matters and what God might be inviting us toward, even as other doors seem to be closing. This leads to the third revelation God offers men in midlife crisis: the discovery of a new kind of strength, one not based on self-sufficiency, but on surrender. Our culture tends to equate masculinity with autonomy, control, and independence. Men are taught from boyhood that strength means never showing weakness, never admitting need, never revealing vulnerability. By midlife, many men have internalized these messages so deeply that they structure their entire lives around projecting an image of unwavering competence and self-sufficiency. The crisis comes when circumstances make this facade impossible to maintain, when life delivers challenges that cannot be overcome through sheer force of will or individual effort. Ignatius discovered this new understanding of strength during his long convalescence. A proud soldier accustomed to physical prowess and self-determination, he was suddenly dependent on others for the most basic needs. His plans for his future were shattered, his sense of control demolished. In this state of radical vulnerability, he encountered a God who didn't demand performative strength, but instead offered divine strength made perfect in human weakness. What emerged was a new understanding of power not as self-sufficient autonomy, but as receptivity to grace, not as the absence of limitation, but as the capacity to surrender to something greater than oneself. For men in midlife crisis, this revelation often arrives through experiences of profound limitation. The executive who suffers burnout discovers he cannot sustain his former pace through willpower alone. The divorced father confronts his inability to control the outcomes that matter most to him. The man facing health challenges encounters the inescapable vulnerability of the human condition. The professional who loses his job in his 50s finds his carefully cultivated image of success suddenly unsustainable. In each case, what's revealed is not just personal limitation, but the bankruptcy of a cultural ideal of masculinity built on the myth of the self-made, self-contained man who needs nothing and no one. Ignatius would invite men facing such limitations to see them not as failures, but as doorways to authentic strength. In his spiritual exercises, he includes a prayer called the Suscipe, from the Latin word meaning receive. Take, Lord, and receive all my liberty, my memory, my understanding, and my entire will, all that I have and possess. You have given all to me. To you, O Lord, I return it. All is yours. Dispose of it wholly according to your will. Give me only your love and your grace, for this is sufficient for me. This prayer represents a radical inversion of conventional notions of strength. Rather than clutching tightly to autonomy and control, it opens the hands to release what was never truly ours to possess. This surrender is not passive resignation but active trust, not weakness, but a different kind of courage, the courage to acknowledge dependence and need. For men accustomed to deriving their sense of worth from achievement, productivity, and self-sufficiency, this is perhaps the most challenging spiritual transition of midlife, but also the most liberating. God reveals to men in midlife crisis that true strength lies not in never falling but in the willingness to get up again. Not in never failing but in beginning anew. Not in never needing help, but in the courage to ask for it. This is the strength Ignatius discovered in his own moment of catastrophic loss. A strength grounded not in self-reliance, but in radical trust in divine providence. It's the paradoxical power that emerges when we stop trying to be gods of our own small kingdoms, and instead embrace our humanity in all its glorious limitation and need. For men navigating the challenges of aging, career transitions, relationship difficulties, or spiritual emptiness in midlife, this revelation offers a profound alternative to both denial and despair. It suggests that the experiences that most threaten our conventional notions of masculine strength and identity might actually be invitations to discover a more authentic and sustainable kind of power, one not dependent on youth, achievement, position, or performance. What emerges is a vision of mature masculinity marked not by dominance or independence, but by wisdom, vulnerability, and the capacity to receive as well as to give. This brings us to the fourth revelation God offers men in midlife crisis: the invitation to find God in all things, especially in the unexpected and unwelcome circumstances of life. One of the most distinctive aspects of Ignatian spirituality is its insistence that God is actively present and discoverable in every dimension of human experience, not just in obviously religious contexts or consoling spiritual moments. Ignatius believed that God speaks to us through our desires, our disappointments, our successes and failures, our joys and sorrows. All are potential messengers of divine communication, if we have eyes to see and ears to hear. For men in midlife transition, this revelation is especially powerful because it suggests that the very experiences that feel most disruptive or painful might be precisely where God is most actively present and speaking. The job loss that threatens financial security might be God's invitation to work that better aligns with your deepest values. The health challenge that confronts you with your mortality might be awakening you to what truly matters while there's still time to reorient your life. The relationship difficulty that disrupts your family might be creating space for more authentic connection. The spiritual emptiness that haunts your achievements might be calling you to a more integrated way of living. In his spiritual exercises, Ignatius teaches a form of prayer called composition of place, in which one imaginatively enters into gospel scenes, paying attention to sensory details and allowing oneself to be present to the living Christ. This practice trains us to recognize God's presence not just in Scripture, but in the concrete circumstances of our own lives. It cultivates what Ignatius called spiritual sight, the capacity to perceive divine activity in the midst of ordinary human experience. For the man in midlife crisis, this practice offers a way to reframe what feels like meaningless suffering or random misfortune as potentially meaningful encounter. Consider how this perspective might transform a common midlife experience like job loss. From a conventional viewpoint, unemployment in one's 40s or 50s represents failure, insecurity, and diminishment. But viewed through an Ignatian lens of finding God in all things, the same experience might reveal itself as an invitation to reassess priorities, rediscover dormant gifts and passions, or reimagine work in a way that better integrates with other dimensions of life. This doesn't deny the real challenges and pain of such transitions, but it suggests they may have meaning and purpose beyond what's immediately apparent. Similarly, the physical changes that accompany aging need not be interpreted solely as decline. The slowing down of the body might be inviting a deeper attentiveness to the present moment. The limitations that prevent former activities might be creating space for new ones better suited to this season of life. The confrontation with mortality might be awakening a more authentic engagement with the preciousness of each day. In each case, What initially appears as loss might reveal itself as invitation when approached with the expectation that God is present and communicating through even these unwelcome experiences. This capacity to find God in all things is especially crucial for men whose spiritual lives have often been compartmentalized or neglected amidst the demands of career and family responsibilities. The crisis of midlife, whether triggered by external circumstances or internal emptiness, often shatters this compartmentalization, revealing the inadequacy of a spirituality confined to Sunday mornings or occasional retreats. What's needed instead is a spirituality robust enough to encompass the full range of human experience, including disappointment, failure, limitation, and loss. A spirituality that doesn't require escape from ordinary life, but finds God in the midst of it. Ignatius models this integrated spirituality through his ideal of being a contemplative in action, someone who brings prayerful awareness to everyday activities and sees even the most mundane tasks as opportunities for divine encounter. For men accustomed to separating the sacred from the secular, the spiritual from the practical, this represents a profound reintegration of dimensions of life often kept apart. It suggests that the businessman, the father, the husband, the friend, the citizen, and the believer need not be separate identities, but facets of a single, coherent self, rooted in relationship with God. The invitation to find God in all things also offers men in midlife a powerful antidote to the cynicism that often accompanies disappointment and disillusionment. When dreams don't materialize as planned, when institutions prove less than ideal, when relationships don't fulfill their promise, the temptation toward a protective detachment is strong. But the Ignatian perspective suggests another possibility. Not naive optimism that denies difficulty, but a clear-eyed hope that perceives meaning and possibility even in the midst of brokenness and limitation. It's the capacity to say, "This isn't what I expected or wanted, but God is present even here, and something meaningful can emerge from this unwelcome reality." For men navigating the particular challenges of midlife and beyond, this revelation offers a path beyond both denial and despair. It acknowledges the real losses and limitations that accompany aging and life transitions, while affirming that these experiences need not be meaningless or purely diminishing. Instead, they might be the very means through which God is inviting us to a deeper, more authentic, and more integrated way of being in the world. What feels like ending might actually be beginning. What seems like loss might be making space for something new to emerge. Before continuing further, I want to ask you something that might feel deeply personal. Have you ever had the sense that God was speaking to you through a loss or disappointment that initially seemed only negative? That moment when what felt like the worst thing that could happen somehow became a doorway to unexpected growth or new direction. If this resonates with your experience, I invite you to share in the comments with the words, "God spoke through my loss." Your story, even briefly shared, could be exactly what another person needs to recognize similar movements in their own life. There's something powerful about naming these experiences, about acknowledging that what looked at first like pure misfortune eventually revealed itself as something more complex, perhaps even grace disguised as disruption. In sharing these recognitions with each other, we create sacred space for seeing our lives with new eyes, for discerning the hidden invitations within our most challenging seasons. This brings us to the fifth revelation God offers men in midlife crisis: the discovery of a new kind of ambition, one oriented toward love rather than achievement or acquisition. In our culture, ambition is typically directed toward external markers of success: more wealth, higher position, greater recognition, expanded influence. Men in particular are encouraged to channel their energy and drive toward climbing ladders of various kinds, achieving measurable outcomes that validate their worth and status. By midlife, many have experienced both the rewards and the costs of this kind of ambition, some degree of material success and recognition, perhaps, but often accompanied by relational strain, spiritual emptiness, or nagging questions about the meaning of it all. Ignatius experienced a radical reorientation of ambition during his convalescence and spiritual awakening. Once driven by dreams of military glory and courtly romance, he found himself increasingly drawn toward a different kind of greatness, what he would later call the more universal good, or the magis, Latin for more or greater. This wasn't the abandonment of ambition, but its redirection toward aims worthy of a human life. Aspirations like greater love, deeper service, more authentic relationship with God and others, and participation in building a more just world. For men in midlife transition, this revelation often arrives through the painful recognition that conventional ambitions, even when achieved, cannot satisfy the soul's deepest longings. The corner office that once represented the pinnacle of professional success now feels confining. The wealth that promised security and freedom now seems to demand constant vigilance and management. The status that conferred validation now feels hollow when weighed against questions of ultimate meaning and purpose. These realizations need not lead to resignation or the abandonment of meaningful goals. Instead, they invite a reimagination of ambition itself, a redirection of drive and energy toward aims more worthy of our one precious life. In his spiritual exercises, Ignatius includes a meditation called The Call of the King, which invites the retreatant to imagine Christ as a noble leader, calling followers to participate in a mission of profound importance, transforming the world through love and service. This meditation speaks powerfully to men accustomed to responding to challenges and missions, but it reframes ambition within a larger story of meaning and purpose. It suggests that the drive for achievement and impact need not be abandoned, but can be channeled toward ends that contribute to genuine human flourishing, rather than mere personal advancement. For men navigating midlife transitions, this redirection of ambition often manifests in practical ways. The business executive begins to measure success not just by profit margins, but by the creation of a workplace where people can thrive and contribute meaningfully. The professional reorients his career towards sectors or roles that better align with his deepest values. The father invests more intentionally in the formation of his children's character and spiritual life. The community member directs his leadership gifts toward causes that promote justice and human dignity. In each case, ambition isn't abandoned but purified, directed toward that which truly merits our finite energy and attention. Ignatius captures this reoriented ambition in his prayer for generosity. Lord, teach me to be generous. Teach me to serve you as you deserve, to give and not to count the cost, to fight and not to heed the wounds, to toil and not to seek for rest, to labor and not to ask for reward, save that of knowing that I do your will. This prayer expresses ambition of the highest order, but one measured by depth of love rather than height of achievement, by quality of service rather than quantity of acquisition. For men accustomed to deriving their sense of worth and identity from conventional markers of success, this reorientation can be profoundly disruptive. It challenges deeply internalized beliefs about what constitutes a good or successful life. Yet it also offers liberation from the exhausting treadmill of achievement that never quite satisfies, the endless pursuit of more that somehow always leaves us wanting. In its place emerges the possibility of a life driven by deeper purposes, animated by love rather than anxiety, measured by impact rather than appearance. This revelation also offers men in midlife a powerful antidote to one of the most common and devastating experiences of this life stage: regret. By midlife, most men have accumulated a catalog of might-have-beens, roads not taken, opportunities missed, mistakes made. The temptation to fixate on these regrets can lead to a paralyzing sense that it's too late to live meaningfully, that the most significant chapters of life are already written. But the Ignatian understanding of reoriented ambition suggests otherwise. It proposes that our past, with all its failures and missed opportunities, need not determine our future. What matters is not where we've been, but where we're going, not what we've failed to do, but what we choose now. Ignatius himself models this possibility of new beginnings in midlife and beyond. He was nearly 30 when his military career ended in catastrophic injury. He was 33 when he began formal studies to prepare for priestly ministry, sitting alongside students much younger than himself. He was 37 when he and his companions founded the Society of Jesus. His most productive and impactful years came not in the flush of youth, but in the maturity of middle and later life. For men confronting their own sense of time's passage and opportunities missed, Ignatius stands as a powerful reminder that it's never too late to reorient ambition toward that which truly matters. This redirection of ambition also offers healing for what might be called success wounds, the hidden costs of achievement pursued at the expense of other dimensions of human flourishing. By midlife, many outwardly successful men find themselves relationally impoverished, physically depleted, emotionally disconnected, or spiritually empty. the single-minded pursuit of conventional ambitions has exacted a price they may only now be recognizing. The good news Ignatius offers is that these wounds need not be permanent. A reoriented ambition creates space for healing and reintegration, for recovery of neglected dimensions of self and relationship with others. For the man in midlife crisis, God reveals that what feels like the death of ambition might actually be its rebirth in more authentic form. The energy and drive that once propelled career advancement or wealth accumulation need not disappear, but can be redirected toward aims more worthy of a human life, contributing to others' flourishing, building a more just world, deepening capacity for love and presence, investing in the formation of the next generation. What emerges is not the absence of ambition, but its transformation, not resignation, but reimagination. This leads to the sixth and final revelation God offers men in midlife crisis: the discovery that our deepest identity lies not in what we do, but in whose we are. Throughout life, but especially in its first half, men tend to derive their sense of self primarily from roles: father, husband, professional, achievements, degrees earned, positions attained, wealth accumulated, or attributes: strength, intelligence, competence. The crisis of midlife often involves the painful recognition of the impermanence of these identity markers. Roles change as children grow and careers evolve. Achievements that once seemed definitive fade in significance. Attributes that seemed essential to self-definition diminish with age or changing circumstances. In his spiritual exercises, Ignatius offers a different foundation for identity through what he calls the first principle and foundation, which begins, "Man is created to praise, reverence, and serve God our Lord, and by this means to save his soul." This principle establishes human identity not in what we accomplish or possess, but in the relationship for which we were created. We are, first and foremost, beloved children of God, created for loving relationship with our Creator and with one another. Everything else, careers, roles, achievements, possessions, is secondary and finds its proper meaning only in relation to this primary identity. For men navigating midlife transitions, this revelation offers both challenge and profound consolation. It challenges the deeply internalized belief that our worth depends on our utility, productivity, or success in worldly terms. It confronts the masculine tendency to seek validation through doing rather than being. Yet it also offers the consolation that our deepest identity cannot be threatened by job loss, physical decline, relationship changes, or any of the other losses that typically trigger midlife crises. What's most essential about us, our belovedness in God's sight, remains unaltered by changing circumstances. In practical terms, this revelation invites men to examine the sources of their self-understanding and sense of worth. From what wells are you drawing your sense of identity? How much of your self-concept depends on things that can and eventually will change? What would remain if roles, achievements, and external markers of success were stripped away? These are not abstract philosophical questions, but urgent practical ones for men facing the inevitable transitions and losses of midlife and beyond. Ignatius suggests that true freedom and peace come from grounding identity in that which cannot be taken away. In a famous passage from the Spiritual Exercises, he writes about the need for indifference, better translated as freedom, toward created things. We should not fix our desires on health rather than sickness, wealth rather than poverty, honor rather than dishonor, a long life rather than a short one, and similarly for all the rest. But we should desire and choose only what helps us more toward the end for which we are created. This is not stoic detachment, but spiritual freedom, the capacity to find our center in God's love, rather than in the changing circumstances of life. For men accustomed to deriving their sense of self from what they do, this shift toward an identity rooted in whose they are represents a profound spiritual transition. It's a movement from doing to being, from achievement to receptivity, from self-construction to divine discovery. This doesn't mean abandoning meaningful work or responsible roles, but approaching them from a different center, one not dependent on outcome or recognition for its stability and worth. This revelation also offers healing for one of the most common and painful experiences of men in midlife and beyond, the sense of invisibility or irrelevance that often accompanies aging in a youth-obsessed culture. As men move into their 50s, 60s, and beyond, many find themselves increasingly overlooked, their contributions undervalued, their presence less commanding of attention and respect than in earlier years. This experience can be profoundly disorienting for men accustomed to recognition and influence. But the Ignatian understanding of identity suggests that our worth has never depended on visibility or validation from others. What matters is not being seen but being known, not by many but by the one who created us and calls us by name. Ignatius himself experienced this transition from a life oriented around being seen and admired to one centered in being known and loved by God. As a young man, he was obsessed with appearances, spending hours grooming his hair and attending to his courtly presentation. After his conversion, he swung to the opposite extreme, neglecting his appearance to the point of becoming unkempt. Eventually, he found balance, caring for his appearance without being defined by it, embodying the freedom of one who knows himself primarily as beloved of God, rather than as object of others' admiration or criticism. For men navigating the challenges of aging and life transition, this shift in identity offers not resignation but liberation. It suggests that what feels like diminishment might actually be simplification, a stripping away of the inessential to reveal what's most true and enduring about us. Like a sculpture emerging from marble as extraneous stone is removed, our truest self becomes more visible as the roles, achievements, and attributes we once confused with identity are gradually relativized by time and circumstance. This doesn't mean abandoning meaningful contribution or responsible action in the world. In fact, Ignatius and his companions remained enormously productive throughout their lives, founding schools, serving the poor, advising leaders, and building institutions that endure to this day. But their activity flowed from a different source, not anxious self-validation, but grateful response to divine love. They worked not to earn worth, but to express it, not to construct identity, but to live from it. For men in midlife and beyond, this revelation offers an alternative to both denial and despair in the face of inevitable change and loss. It acknowledges the real grief that accompanies role transitions, physical limitations, and shifting social position while affirming that none of these changes touch the core of who we most truly are. What remains when everything else is stripped away is not emptiness, but essence, not vacancy, but pure belovedness, the ground of our being that cannot be threatened by any external circumstance. If you found these reflections on Ignatian spirituality for men navigating midlife transitions meaningful, I invite you to subscribe to this channel where we explore the wisdom of the saints for contemporary life. Each week, we delve into teachings that can illuminate your spiritual journey and help you discover deeper purpose and meaning. You're not alone in seeking a faith that addresses the real challenges of adult life. Many of us are walking this path together, trying to live with greater authenticity and purpose. By subscribing, you'll join a community of seekers supporting each other through life's inevitable transitions and challenges. I would be honored to accompany you on this journey as we continue exploring the treasures of our spiritual tradition. Thank you for spending this time in reflection. Your presence here is already a sign of your openness to God's movement in your life. As we draw our reflections to a close, let's return to where we began, with Ignatius lying in bed, his legs shattered, his former life in ruins. What appeared to be an ending was actually a beginning. What seemed to be devastating loss became the gateway to his true calling. The cannonball that struck him was not the end of his story, but its true beginning. 5 centuries later, his example and teachings continue to transform lives around the world, including perhaps your own life today as you listen to these words. Your own moment of crisis, whatever form it takes, is not a deviation from God's plan for your life, but potentially a crucial part of it. The job loss, health challenge, relationship difficulty, or spiritual emptiness that has disrupted your carefully constructed life may be the very means through which God is inviting you to a more authentic way of being in the world. What feels like failure may be the prerequisite for a different kind of success. What seems like loss may be making space for something new to emerge. This doesn't minimize the real pain of these experiences, or suggest that God causes suffering to teach us lessons. Rather, it affirms that nothing in our lives, not even our most painful experiences, need be meaningless or without purpose if we have eyes to see and hearts open to transformation. As Ignatius discovered in his own moment of catastrophic loss, God speaks most clearly when everything we've relied on has been stripped away. In the silence that follows the collapse of former certainties, a different voice can be heard, one calling us to a more authentic, integrated, and meaningful life than we previously imagined possible. For men over 40 navigating the particular challenges of this life stage, the wisdom of Ignatius offers both practical guidance and profound hope. It acknowledges the real losses and limitations that accompany aging and life transitions, while affirming that these experiences need not be merely diminishing. Instead, they might be invitations to discovery, to liberation from patterns and beliefs that have constrained rather than enhanced our humanity, to the emergence of a more authentic self grounded in that which cannot be threatened by changing circumstances. The journey from what philosopher Richard Rohr calls the first half of life to the second half isn't easy. It involves real grief for what's passing away, genuine uncertainty about what lies ahead, and the hard work of re-examining assumptions long taken for granted. But as Ignatius discovered in his own midlife crisis, what awaits on the other side of this passage is worth everything it costs. It's a life characterized by greater freedom, deeper authenticity, and more meaningful contribution. A life no longer driven primarily by fear, convention, or the need for validation, but by love, purpose, and gratitude. The invitation God extends to every man in midlife crisis is not to cling desperately to what's passing away or to resign himself to diminishment, but to trust that what feels like ending might actually be beginning. What seems like loss might be making space for something new to emerge. It's the invitation Ignatius accepted as he lay in bed, his former identity in ruins, his future uncertain. What emerged from his courageous response to that invitation was not just a transformed individual life, but a spiritual legacy that continues to offer guidance and hope to countless seekers 5 centuries later. Your own moment of crisis, whatever form it takes, offers the same possibility. Not just for personal transformation, but for contribution to a world in desperate need of mature, integrated men living from their deepest truth, rather than from fear, convention, or the need for validation. The wisdom you've gained through your own experiences of success and failure, joy and sorrow, connection and loss isn't meant just for you. Like Ignatius, you're invited to allow your own transformation to become a gift for others, still finding their way through similar passages. In the ruins of what once seemed certain, God speaks most clearly if we have ears to hear. The invitation extended in those moments of disruption and loss is not to rebuild what was, but to discover what might be. Not to recover what's passing away, but to receive what's being offered. Not to return to a former self, but to become more fully who we truly are and have always been in God's sight. It's an invitation to the kind of spiritual freedom Ignatius discovered in his own moment of crisis. The freedom that comes from knowing ourselves primarily as beloved of God rather than as the sum of our achievements, possessions, or attributes. As you navigate your own midlife passage, may you discover in even your most challenging experiences the presence of a God who wastes nothing, who uses all things for good, who meets us most powerfully in our places of greatest vulnerability and need. And may you find in the wisdom of Ignatius a trustworthy guide for the journey, one who knows from personal experience that what appears to be catastrophic ending might actually be the beginning of the most meaningful chapter of your life. For in the ruins of what once seemed certain, God speaks most clearly to those with ears to hear, revealing not just who He is, but who we truly are and have always been in His sight. Beloved children invited to partnership in the healing and transformation of the world.